What is the biggest mistake brands take when building out a campaign plan, including their creative and advertising?
I would say the biggest mistake is not leaning into who you're trying to speak to. I wanted to talk about current awards that have just taken place, the Cannes Creativity Awards. And I guess in a world where you used to be able to, there's 4 TV channels, people are going to have to watch your ad. That can work. But now we're in an environment where people within 1, 2, 3 seconds are swiping away. I wanted to talk about the current awards that have just taken place, the Cannes Creativity Awards, and really our view of those, which is maybe a bit different from the rest of the markets. I think for one thing, there's a lot of digital agencies that wouldn't even pay attention or know there is Creativity Awards. But then we've definitely got the other side where we're celebrating making ads which are creative in nature, not focused on performance or effectiveness for clients. There was actually a study done by WARC which showed that people who won awards for creative and then the crossover with that with effectiveness was in the single figures, showing that often we celebrate creativity for ads as if it's an art form rather than the effectiveness of the ad of which it's designed for. And I think it's a real problem and a trap for marketers is that they make ads that they like for themselves in boardrooms. They approve ads on massive screens rather than thinking about what this is going to be like on a phone. And I guess in a world where you used to be able to, there's 4 TV channels, people are going to have to watch your ad. That can work. But now we're in an environment where people within 1, 2, 3 seconds are swiping away. This idea of making ads to be creative and celebrating that feels, like a very big hubris that the marketing fraternity has. What's your views on developing out a creative strategy that's focused on the customer versus the brand?
So I think there's 2 types of creativity when it comes to advertising from a digital perspective. The first is around creative that actually gets people to engage and understand what you're talking about, whether it's a product or a service, and convert or take an action that you're looking for them to do. So that probably is a world away from the Cannes Advertising Awards in the sense that it doesn't matter how creative the ad is if somebody doesn't watch or doesn't connect to what the subject matter is. So in that sense, I think they're worlds apart. The measurement for creativity from a conversion perspective or a consideration perspective really should be from a metric side of things. So how much of the video did they watch? How many people stopped in the first 3 seconds? What action did they take after? It's really data-driven measurements for creativity. Secondly, but if we're talking about like brand affinity or brand recall, in the sense of, is that brand staying front of center of mind? Things can be a little different. So even in the digital sense. So somebody's sitting on the couch watching their catch-up TV, they're seeing an ad on the TV, they're on their phone while they're, waiting for the programming to start again. And say, for example, you look at the Telstra ad with the whistling. For the entirety of the ad, you don't know that it has anything to do with Telstra, phones, communications, networking, other than a Telstra logo in the last 1 second. If you didn't catch that last couple of seconds, you wouldn't know that it had anything to do with Telstra communications. So that's an award-winning ad, in my view, that is rewarding the wrong aspects of advertising. If I want somebody to remember my brand when they're not in market, it can be catchy and it can be well designed, but it really should be reflecting their topics, the thematics that are relevant to the brand or their values. And I think that's where, in certain instances, advertising loses its way. I understand that there's a strong role for brand ads to play to people who are not in market, but if you are just designing things that have absolutely no correlation to your subject matter, I think it's an entirely waste of time.
Yeah, it feels very tone deaf of what we go home and consume. So you have a marketing team that's agreeing to do things. And when I was part of marketing teams, we did this homepage takeovers and ads that we thought, you wait for the reveal till the 20th second because that's when you really hook them in. You really view the way you look at your brand in your 9 to 5 is very different to when you actually go home in your 5 to 9 and you're scrolling yourself. You're regularly making decisions as a marketer to like ignore, yet we constantly find getting ad creative that's approved that has that sort of frame of reference. Another really interesting piece that came out of Cannes, I saw some mention of some research that was showing that, hey, you can build a brand through micro ads. So the research came out and said 10 seconds is the optimal time. And so don't focus on making 30 to 45-second spots, focus on 10 seconds. Made me laugh in the sense that I know exactly what will happen. It will filter through to best practices. The holding company, media companies, and creatives will start requesting we need 10-second ads, and it will completely miss the actual insight of it, why it's 10 seconds. It's not a 10-second ad because that's what it is in length. This isn't just let's get you 30-second TVC and make it 10 seconds. It's actually thinking about what is a great ad that goes for 10 seconds? What is the actual structure of that? And I think that piece continues to be massively missed and is probably the biggest opportunity if we talk about creative being the biggest growth lever. If you're wanting to advertise your brand and build brand affinity, having these micro ads of 10 seconds is great as long as you've thought about what that 10 seconds is. And I'd argue if you've structured that really well, you've got a hook, a hold, and a call to action, whatever that call to action might be, whether it's just purely knowing the brand exists, that could still be 30 seconds, 1 minute. I don't agree with the 10 seconds as that's not the North Star. We're not trying to make 10 seconds ads. We're trying to think about the structure of the ads. But what's your view on a 10-second ad being the right way for a brand to build?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the channel. So, for example, if we're talking about digital, we're moving quickly. So, we're scrolling, we're trying to find the content we're looking for. We don't get stuck on things. When it comes to TV advertising, for example, I think things have changed materially in terms of the way TV advertising's done, and I don't believe that advertisers and agencies have recognized that. So, in the old days, you would get up during the ad break, you'd make a cup of tea, you'd maybe put something in the microwave, put something away, whatever it is, but you sort of were still tuned into reality. You could hear what was going on in the background. And for TV ads, it was all about building into the call to action, and then finally, you've got somebody's attention and can capture them. I think that's different now. So people tune out. They during the ad breaks, they go on their phone, they go on their tablet, they really tune out until their programming comes back. So there's in my view, a big shift to still needing an interruption early on in the ad. So we could call that the thumb stop ratio for TV ads, in the sense that if you don't grab somebody in the first 3 to 10 seconds, they're probably not going to even hear your message by the time it gets to the end. You want to capture their attention and then have creative content that's actually going to engage them all the way through the ad. I think that's entirely different to the way it used to be, and I don't think anybody's really picked up on that yet.
Yeah, it's this sort of slow build still, comes through so massively. And I think when you think about where is the majority of your impressions for this ad going to be, often it is not built for where that would be, which is going to be inside feeds in a portrait style. We're still constantly seeing ad creative and ideas that are designed for a landscape, 30-second forced view environment from a TV or an unskippable BVOD or something like that then gets cut down for TV, which is cut down for digital, which is just completely missing how people are going to consume that ad, and ends up being a massive waste from a production budget standpoint. Anything else from creativity or effectiveness of ads to talk about?
No, but I'd like to pose a question back to you. What is the biggest mistake brands take when building out a campaign plan, including their creative and advertising?
From my experience being in marketing teams and seeing how the creative agencies work, often the biggest brands and the biggest creative agencies and media have the most amount of research available to them. And so, unlike a lot of mid-tier or smaller brands that are starved of research or are using research and insights from 2, 3, 4 years ago, these big brands often have such a plethora of insights. And maybe at the start, the brief includes that, but by the time we actually get to the filter down approved ad, we're so far away from communicating something that's actually relevant for their target customer or their end customer. We end up designing something that feels creative, or that's something that the marketing team likes or the agency likes. And they may not be the demographic, or they're definitely not going to be the bulk of the demographic. And so I would say the biggest mistake is not leaning into who you were trying to speak to. The analogy I've given a lot is sitting in brand strategy sessions And often the question comes up and says, oh, if our brand had a party, who would we invite and what? And it's all about the brand. And I actually think there's a step that it gets missed when we then get to campaigns or positioning, which is if your brand was invited to a party, who would it be? Whose party is it? Because in the end of the day, the campaign is sitting in the consumer's world. It's sitting in their feed. It's sitting in between the TV show or the BVOD or whatever they're trying to catch up and watch. So the biggest mistake I see is brands ignoring the environment in which the consumer is going to see that. And probably the underpinning of that is a full focus on designing a TV ad. Even when they say it's going to have a digital component and they're thinking through, oh, we've done a portrait, we put portrait lines on the camera screen, they're still designing with TV in mind.
There's two critical mistakes I think most brands make when it comes to building out campaign strategies. The first, I want to give an analogy. So maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when you're looking at website traffic, we switched over to being mobile first. So the majority of your website traffic came from mobile phones. Yet even today, 7 years later, you will often be working on a website build and it will be desktop first. And the question's got to be asked why. And the main reason is predominantly that's the way things have been done, as opposed to moving with the times. And advertising's a bit the same. So today, when campaigns are developed, they're largely developed with creative in mind for above the line and below the line channels, but predominantly not digital. And the assets that then get finalized for digital are filmed incorrectly, are the wrong aspect ratios, don't have the right subject matter for ad platforms to deliver it to the right people. And it should be a digital first strategy. So we figure out what assets are required, how they need to be filmed, how they are suitable for above the line and below the line offline media, and work at that direction. We're probably 5 years behind where campaigns need to be designed that way. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the fact that a lot of the times campaigns, as Chris was talking about, are designed for the advertiser. They're not designed for the end customer. And we're in a period from now that is effectively one where the customer wants brands to be talking to them about things that they are interested in. They just don't want to be broadcast about the brand. So messaging needs to be a lot more informative and interesting to the individual. That's not putting an ad saying, here's my product or my service, and giving some poor feature descriptions around why your brand. It's actually about getting them engaged and you're a subject matter expert on a particular topic. Talk to them about that subject, inform them, get them interested in understanding what you know when they're not in market. And then by the time they are, they'll start to consider your brand. And you can put those product and service things in front of them. But at the same token, you should be focusing on the benefit to the customer and not the feature of the product. It's a constant issue we see time and time again.
You just made me realize one of the probably hidden performance gains of user generated content. So a lot of the research is showing, particularly on a meta side, that an ad account should have 50% of its creative as user generated content. And potentially why that's so successful is because user generated content does exactly what you talk about. It's brief to focus on benefits. It's showing the target market, as we spoke about before, but it's also making it relevant for that end customer. And so maybe it's more of a damning result of the focus on creativity over effectiveness that actually 50% of UGC to be a high performing ad account is because the other 50% of ad creative is probably not speaking as much as it should to the actual end customer. That might be something for us to pick up from that side. I think, as you're saying as well, maybe it's just even having our phones as the approval process of, even when we're looking at ads or when you're considering the flows, look at an ad. Would you watch this on your phone? Click through to a website. What's that experience like? It's a good point that we're still in. I also know when we talk about digital first or anything first, that triggers a large amount of the Mark Ritson marketing community who've done their MBA of, nothing should be first. It should just be a marketing strategy first. I think it's important to stress that, yes, that's the case. We're not trying to create a different strategy for digital, but what is clearly not working is having an offline focus and just assuming we can make an edit of a 10-second ad, a 15-second ad or whatever. Think about where the majority of that time is spent. They're the brands that are going to succeed in this next era.
I'd say ask your e-commerce manager or your digital marketing manager, are they sick of creative that's a square peg in a round hole? And if the answer is very quickly yes, you've got a problem that needs to be addressed.